Being gay is okay, but trans, non-binary? That ruins our reputation!
At least that's what supporters of the LGBT without the T movement claim. But who are they? They call themselves the normal gays.
I'm not in a community just cause I f guys.
Others call them pick-me gays.
Just cause I don't want makeup, gaga, or colorful hair?
I'm not queer. I am married to a woman.
No?
Oh,
I'm not queer, I am gay.
Right.
Hey, I used to think just like him, just like our German top politicians did. When I was, I don't know, 16? But hey, no shame, it's easy to fall into that trap, because we all live in it. A system built by the powerful designed to steer and to control us.
Okay, bro's going conspiracy crazy.
Conspiracy actually plays a role here, a very real one. Because in the end, I'll tell you who's really behind LGB without the T stuff, and why.
The Illuminati?
Not quite, but to understand the end, we have to go back to the beginning. Just what is a pick-me-gay? The term comes from pick-me-girl. It was coined in the 2010s and describes a girl or woman who's just not like the other girls. Oh, Justin, I can't reach that. I'm too small and cute and fragile. Pick me means choose me, showing that she performs to please a man. And so naturally, the pick me girl evolved to fit whatever men wanted over time. Yo, what's up? I'll give you your cap back if you can beat me in Final Fantasy.
Oh, there isn't even PvP.
The 2000s set the tone. Women are all the same. Equally annoying, dumb, and only good for one thing.
Yeah, but I feel like if she could cook, she wouldn't have that black eye.
To be worth more, a pick-me girl has to look down on other women. The dumb blonde. The one with too much makeup. The one with plastic surgery. Because she's different. And it works so well because we live in a world that's made to make women feel constantly insecure. It's by design. So they turn against each other instead of turning on the system. The winners, of course, are the ones who built that system. Men. They sit in the executive offices of newspapers, TV networks, and Hollywood studios. They create the beauty ideal. And at the same time, they also design the object of hatred.
There are women in executive offices too.
Back then, hardly any. More today, but not thanks to men. Rather to activists who actually shook the system. And even among those women, many of them have become victims of it. Looking down on other women, seeing them as weak and emotional, or even too feminine. Because leadership and ruthlessness are traits that our society too often associates with masculine energy.
She was being overdramatic.
Of course she was. She's a woman.
So what's that got to do with gays, man?
Pick-me girls are the result of misogyny. Just like the pick-me gays.
What?
Either you're too feminine or too non-conforming. Doesn't that sound kind of familiar?
Huh? I'm gay because I like men, not women or freaks.
It all comes from the same system.
How so?
Anyone who grows up in a society that equates femininity with stupidity and weakness, where survival means adapting, and then realizes there's something inside them that can't be adapted, something only women are supposed to have. Namely sexual attraction to men. They start thinking,
Merry Crisis!
So gays fear having too much woman in them?
No, not all, of course, but naturally society rubs off on gay people like women are great for company, for fun and entertainment. But at the end of the day, I'm a man, and that makes me superior.
Who actually thinks that?
I'm exaggerating on purpose. Few people believe it so clearly. It's more about unconscious attitudes and tendencies. In reality, it looks a little more like this.
I'm not gay, but I like boys. I personally don't like to label myself as gay because for me, that word comes with things like glitter, rainbow parades.
And you begin to compensate by overdoing masculinity, rejecting every other feminine trait that's seen as negative, so you stand out less and you fit in again with your bro dudes. I'm just like you guys. Right? Say it! Hysterical like a girl.
God, how can someone be that desperate?
Well, humans are social beings, and the fear of exclusion triggers survival stress in many queer people. That can grow into an obsessive need to please or to belong. It turns into a constant craving for validation and acceptance, and before you know it, you've become a toxic people pleaser, often with a taste for status consumption just to show everyone you've made it.
I am building a community of business-minded masculine men that are into other men. Comment the word masculine if you're interested.
Oh, the classic masculine hustler mindset that basically screams insecure ego.
And that's exactly how a pick-me-gay is born. A gay man who distances himself and looks down on those who are too different, discriminating within his own community because he doesn't want to be the victim. So he just refuses to identify with that role, throwing out a few anecdotes in denial like,
I don't have all those problems. I'm not difficult.
And the only real winner in this system...
Let me guess. Straight men?
Oh no, that'd be too easy. After all, most of those hustler boys are exactly that. Straight men, victims of the same lies. Self-proclaimed alpha males who are always spitting on beta men. And among them, you'll often find pick-me boys, trying to cosplay what women supposedly want just to get them. The real problem is the system I've been talking about all along. And the question, who's really pulling the strings?
Yeah, and? Spit it out!
Every woman who lets herself be played against another, but also every alpha male and every pick-me-gay is just another puppet in the end. Because none of them realize they're all being steered, manipulated, and used. How? Divide and conquer. That is the strategy used by the far-right elite in order to push forward their secret war. The culture war. But why? Because they know they can't win against the masses. But the more divided a country is, the easier it becomes for right-wing forces to seize control. As former AFD spokesman Christian Luth once said,
the worse things get for Germany, the better it is for the AFD.
And how does divide and conquer work? You take one group and you split it apart, piece by piece, until it's easier to get rid of. That happens through armies of social bots that make you believe a certain opinion is dominant. In Germany, where nearly 70% of all online activity comes from bad bots, they've influenced public opinion. In the 2024 EU elections, the migration debate, and even the war in Ukraine. All evidence points towards the AFD and Russia. Another divide and conquer tactic you'll often see are orchestrated false flag campaigns like LGB without the T.
Here we go! Man, you always start so ridiculously far back.
Sorry. It all began back in 2015.
I told you.
Right before Trump's first election, when a petition called Drop the T appeared, signed anonymously by a group of gay and bi men and women. It came as a reaction to the equal rights referendum in Houston, which aimed to protect trans people from discrimination.
Protection from discrimination? Unthinkable.
I know, right? In response, we have the No campaign, formed and led by Houston, Texas pastor Dave Welsh. Through targeted propaganda, they managed to rebrand the referendum as the Bathroom Bill, sparking what became the ongoing bathroom panic, framing trans people as dangerous predators. That's how they eventually killed the referendum.
And right after that came the Drop the T petition, totally not suspicious.
And even though it was just some random petition with barely 1,000 signatures, and major LGBTQ+ organizations immediately opposed it, even launching a counter-petition, it still got a wildly disproportionate amount of coverage in right-wing media. Not making accusations, just asking questions.
Drop the T basically became a manual for pick-me-gays, huh? Oh, finally, you're telling me what I have to do to fit in. Oh, mighty straight lords of masculinity.
Exactly. And it's quite likely that the petition was created by those same right-wing conservative church groups.
And, any proof beyond assumption?
Remember Pastor Dave Welsh?
Bathroom Panic Man?
He's closely connected with the right-wing Christian hate organization, FRC, the Family Research Council, which is dedicated to the culture war. At their 2017 Values Voters Summit, a values conference to coordinate hate campaigns, the chair of the board of Concerned Parents announced the following tactic: focus on gender identity to divide and conquer. She said, despite their recent successes, the LGBT community is actually unstable, and trans activists rely on the gay rights movement to legitimize their cause. Gender identity alone is a step too far. if we remove the T from the alphabet soup, we'll have greater success.
Ugh, biggest pick-me chick in history.
She even said how much she despises feminism, but that trans women can be used to sell them to feminists as the ultimate form of misogyny.
Huh?
Because they erase womanhood.
Well, now I guess we know who fed the parrot first.
Protect women, topple trans women.
That's enough out of you.
Terry Schilling, the head of the right-wing APP anti-trans ad machine for Trump, celebrated the success of the divide and conquer strategy in 2025 like this.
The women's sports topic was actually the entry point to bring this issue forward, because it made opponents of the LGBT movement feel comfortable speaking out against trans issues.
In February of 2025, Trump removed trans references from the Stonewall Monument website, even though everyone knows they were fighting on the front lines. And 5 months later, he removed references to bisexuals. Behind LGB without the T stands an orchestrated right-wing campaign, one that pick-me-gays, TERFs, and alphas all run after, letting themselves be used. Because that's what a culture war is. A modern war without weapons, but one that works frighteningly well. Because we humans are easier to hack than any nuclear computer system. Suddenly, you're the soldier, marching into a social war against things that used to be considered harmless and fun, but are now sold to you as dangerous propaganda. Because anything that triggers emotion can be turned into ammunition. Your fear makes you controllable. Even worse, our fear center is so primitive, it's our greatest weakness, literally making us dumber over time.
We are an instinct-driven apex predator that survived in an uncaring world, only now we have coal plants, nuclear weapons, and social media.
Right-wing populists have figured that out, and they use it to isolate people from their own surroundings through division, divide, then control them through fear, conquer. On battlefields where nothing is even won. Your life won't get better if you strip trans people of their rights. It won't get better if you dehumanize migrants. It won't get better if you insult green woke people thinking it gives you control, belonging, or success. Because in the end, you're still the puppet. A puppet of those who constantly pump fear and stress into your brain, convincing you that it's the foreigners, the trans people, the drag queens, and not the right-wing power vultures with their millions, the proligarchs with their billions, or the autocrats with their egos. Sure, now the defiance kicks in, because admitting that means losing control to a force that feels completely overwhelming. But let us all never forget, without divide, there is no conquer. Imagine if women didn't fight each other, and gays sought acceptance and community not from their oppressors, but within their own community. If we stood together instead of tearing ourselves apart because that system's inside our bones making us think that by putting others down we lift ourselves up, then we'd truly be more. A lot more. And if straight dudes realize that they're kept insecure too so they can be controlled, fighting wars for ideals they've been indoctrinated with, but that only make them lose chasing shadows, then the system would collapse.
So what? We're just supposed to shut up and accept everything without criticism?
Nonsense. But we do have to accept reality, and that is, everything is complex. Anyone claiming otherwise is lying.
And if you believe a liar, you turn into a clown and lose in the long run. I get it now. We're all made up of atoms, and atoms always seek the lowest energy state. But sometimes it's worth getting your ass up, men.
Not all men.
Are you single-celled? We've been talking about complexity this whole time. Of course not all men.
But still, men are the army of this system. All these alphas, they'll never be the elite, but they'll always have just enough power to look down and say, I don't want to be them. Divide and conquer. But history is full of military coups, even when the top felt safe. And the last time the richest of the rich were left in power and allowed to abuse it at the expense of the common people, it didn't end so well for them. Together we are more. If you like my content, please support us on Patreon, because the harder things get for all of us, the tougher it is to keep making these videos, as sponsors drop out and ad revenue sinks. Help us stay independent. You can also do that by shopping in our queer store. Thank you and see you soon. Chew-wah!